Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a late night insight video on the second from the Amouage Essences collection. And today we are going to talk about Lustre, I assume. I'm not going to try to pronounce this in French or something. We're going to call this Lustre. So this is a line that was set up to represent the past, present, and future. And it seems we're going backwards in time with my reviews of these because yesterday I reviewed Outlens, which is supposed to be representative of the future. Today we are discussing Lustre, which is supposed to be representative of the present. And then finally we still have Reasons to discuss, which is supposed to be representative of the past. Now, I have absolutely no clue how any of these fragrances tie with the past, present, and future. I'll read you the Amouage blurb here that they write about it in just a second. But their new creative director rambled about sort of how there's this connection between time and space, and it made about as much sense to me as, their Amouage's ramblings on the creative process of barrel aging and how it's better than just infusing sandalwood into the composition, which seems like it would do the exact same thing to me. But whatever, to each their own. I understand in today's economy, everyone needs a selling point, quote unquote. If you want to hear me complain bitterly about all things Amouage Lustre, including the new dreadful looking bottle, go check out my previous review of Outlens, where I spent a lot of time going through a checklist of all of the things that I despise, including this stupid perfumer's batch, act now. Don't let future regret play a role. Get the first perfumer's batch. Anyways, go watch my previous video if you want to hear more about that. So I will tell you, Lustre. Well, first let me read you the blurb so at least you have an idea of what we're discussing here. So here's what Amouage says. Lustre by Julian Rasquinet and Paul Guerlain. A light in the darkness, the gleam of a polished surface, dazzling luminosity. Lustre begins with a spark, a burst of effervescent cardamom that fills the air with spicy vitality. The illumination is extended and softened by orris, a uniquely powdery material that adds a sheen of luxurious romanticism, causing the composition to glow with rich elegance. The white creaminess of the orris is furthered by sandalwood, whose smooth personality projects a sense of perpetual seamlessness. At the scent's conclusion, a delectable vanilla embraces the whole with warm, lingering sophistication, reflecting, emanating, and adoring light. Lustre is an unashamedly poetic olfactory expression of the desire to make the present last until the end of time. Wow. Well, first of all, that write-up I completely disagree with, and I'll tell you why as we go along in this review, but I don't think this is named properly. I don't think there's anything Lustre about this, in my opinion. I will tell you, though, one of the most disappointing parts about Lustre for me is, at least when I reviewed Outlens, I mentioned how the opening of Outlens for the first couple hours at least smelled like an Amouage. Like, I got a couple hours of enjoyment along with it until the dry down came along and just washed everything away with that. I really hated the dry down of Outlens. And, if Amouage isn't careful, I really feel like there are a lot of people who are losing faith in the brand of Amouage, and they're saying they're never going to go back. Just go watch my previous video on Outlens to see how many people are bashing the brand. They have to be careful. It seems like Amouage is washing away their past and present and future, potentially. In fact, I would venture this would be a good time to try and sell the brand. Kind of like how Creed tried to kind of sell at the top, although then BlackRock bought it, doubled it, tripled their money, and then Kering now owns it. So maybe that wasn't the top, but you get the idea. Maybe it'll be a good idea to sell now while this niche bubble is hasn't burst yet. It certainly feels like there's going to be a point where, these prices can't keep going up. You can't keep going exponentially up. What's the next tier? All of the niche fragrances are all going to be $1,000 a bottle. No one's going to buy. I don't know if the average consumer can make those kind of purchases. So yeah, that's my kind of take on the niche side of things. So, but what's interesting is Lustre has kind of the exact opposite effect of Outlens, in that I hate Lustre from the very second it touches my skin. Okay, from the second you spray, now here's the thing. I'm not saying there's zero redeemable qualities, because there are some parts of this fragrance that I like as the hours tick by, but whatever god-awful chemical mess they threw together to make this smell like some sort of a BDK collection creation or something like that, The first 30 minutes to an hour really gets my blood boiling. I really, really disdain the opening of this fragrance. And, what I'm saying is, I don't even get the first couple hours of joy that I got in Outlands. Lustre puts me in a foul mood from the second it touches my skin, okay? Even though some folks mention this cola-like vibe, which is one of my favorite bits of when a couple notes come together to form this Coca-Cola-like accord, this fizzy cola that really jumps out to you in fragrances like Creation E by Roja and stuff like that. You do get a little bit of that here. It's one of my all-time favorite blend of notes whenever something like that happens. I love a good cola vibe, and it does present itself in Lustre in the opening. But there is a note that Amouage clearly made the decision to amp up substantially. And I would be very curious if the perfumers were initially in on this, or if it was like some marketing folks saying, hey, we need to put more into the top. But it just ruins it for me. Okay, I don't know what this note is. Again, I'm not a perfumer. I'm just some guy who loves fragrances who gets on here and sort of gives you my honest opinion, and that's that. And so you can almost see like in my head, I just imagine the Amouage executives going back to the perfumers and saying, nope, we need to pump up more of this modern style opening, whatever it is, like in my head, here's how I imagine it. I imagine this oak barrel, okay? And I imagine little bits and pieces of like cotton candy and cupcakes and whipped cream and sugar, ethyl maltol, all these different sweet notes you can imagine just poured in there, and the Amouage executives just laughing as they like tip the scales and force Paul Guerlain to dump in more ethyl maltol, it just completely ruins it for me. All that shit floating around in their oak barrels that they're so proud of, or, either way, it's a pretty simple thing whenever this combination of notes happens, because to me, it's like, no matter what's underneath, you've papered over it. It's like trying to paint over a wall or something. Maybe there was a beautiful painting on that wall earlier, but you just straight covered it up with red paint. It's very hard to see underneath that red paint, and it just ruins everything. It takes whatever beautiful creation is underneath for me and just ruins it, completely ruins it. So from here, it doesn't really take a fragrance genius to break this scent down. And, seeing Amouage go down this path really makes me sad to my core, like as a perfume lover, because, Amouage was one of the brands that sparked my love of perfumery. When I started to learn about things like Gold Band and then the creations of Christopher Chong's era, Jubilation 25, all that stuff, it's seeing the state of Amouage currently, it's like seeing 58-year-old Mike Tyson fighting, that's not the Iron Mike that we remember, right? And obviously everyone gets old. If they're lucky, things change, all this stuff. But the brand is going down a path that I really feel like hardcore fragrance enthusiasts just cannot follow. It's turning into a brand for the masses, for the folks who want to flex. It's turning into a flex brand, is really what it is. They're trying to do like the Roja Dove thing or something, and not every niche brand can be Roja Dove. Roja Dove worked because he was so far and away different from what was going on at the time. Now every single brand wants to be Roja. Every brand wants to have their fragrances sell for $1,000 a bottle. And you just can't, that's not your identity. So that's my 2 cents on that. But, most of the time when I listen to what folks have to say about, well, this fragrance reminds me of that fragrance, or I'll see all kind of comments in the videos and stuff like that. Most of the time I'm at a loss for words at some of the outlandish, ridiculous things that people make comparisons to. One guy the other day asked me if I thought Bleu de Chanel smelled like Dior Jours. And I was like, pardon me? How much have you had to smoke today, sir? But, the Ask the Audience feature on Parfumo or whatever it is, totally nailed it when it comes to Lustre. Absolutely nailed it. If you can just imagine the boozy opening of something like Creation E without the luster. So someone said, imagine like a matte finish. And you know what? Like the matte finish of the bottle, I've never actually held the bottle in my hand. To be fair, someone said in my last video, you were very, very hard on the bottle. You never even held it in your hand. They're correct. This is just off of the internet, off of seeing like pictures of the bottle, because I have a sample. Sent from a friend. By the way, thank you, Allie, for sending this sample. If it wasn't for folks like her, obviously I wouldn't be able to do these type of just reviews, especially on the newer stuff like this, because I definitely wouldn't give Amouage $50 to send their 3 samples. Fuck that. But interestingly enough, the person who wrote that on Parfumo hit the ball square center out of the park. It has this smell in the opening, which seems very flat, very matte smelling. And I think this strange matte finish like smell has something to do with this very clean iris, which almost feels like there's this like thin layer, of dust. Like you have a desk and you haven't cleaned it off for a while, and you know how this thin layer of dust will just kind of settle. And it kind of takes away from the sheen and sparkle of the desk. If you have like a nice wood desk, you get some pledge and shine it up. The difference between the dust settling after a couple months of not cleaning it and a clean desk is totally different, right? And if you can just imagine this description of this matte booziness like you would get in Creationy with the spices. They say effervescent cardamom. I'll go along with that. I think that's probably the most appropriate part of the description that they wrote up. Yes, the cardamom is slightly effervescent in smell. It has a little bit of this cooling spice aspect, which I really like. And the spice combination starts to smell like you're blending Creationy with this spiciness of something like Clive Christian X for men, or Roja's Reckless Pour Homme, which I believe is recently discontinued. I reviewed it on the channel if you want to check it out. I reviewed it off of the already long discontinued Eau de Parfum, but I think now they also discontinued the Parfum as well. I liked Reckless, but I like Clive Christian's X even more. One of the few times that the Clive Christian, I would say, beats a Roja. Usually I prefer Rojas over Clive Christians. But I have a review on the channel if you want to check that out. But this sits in this very ordinary, very conventional base of resinous myrrh, labdanum, benzoin, and what's called amber rome, which is a cinnarome material that is basically this smell of like leathery ambergris notes with hints of like pepper and tar, tobacco, and coffee. Okay. And you get a little bit of that as the fragrance continues to dry down. Basically, the fragrance is this creamy, slightly spicy, boozy mix that dries down to a resinous, ambery-like base, okay? Nothing special, very generic in my humble opinion. The iris mixing with the resinous myrrh and stuff like that adds this very, meditative, contemplative feel. Some people will say that the fact that they used myrrh and stuff like that is a throwback to previous Amouage days of glory. No, not at all. This does not smell like an Amouage to me at all. In fact, as I said in the beginning, this smells like something you would smell in like a BDK or Parfum de Marly or Initio. They're all starting to smell the same. The lines are all getting blurred, and it doesn't matter what name is on the front of the bottle, whether it's Creed or Roja or Amouage. All of these niche houses they're just in this bucket of trying to do the same things, and it's getting unbelievably boring and tedious. I almost feel like I'm wasting my time. Honestly, I feel like I'm wasting my time doing these reviews. I reviewed Chanel Egoiste from 1990 on the channel within the last week or so, and I got a million times more pleasure out of doing that review than this. This is hell on for me to do. I mean, especially the first couple hours of this being on my skin, absolute hell on. Because whatever that BDK like gene is, okay? And I recently reviewed a BDK fragrance that was hyped on the channel, Vanille Leather or some Leather Vanille or whatever. If you want to get my thoughts on that, go watch that video. But there is this sweetened vanilla thing. They say it's in the base. I get a lot of it in the top. So whatever that candy floss, sweetened vanilla, modern, aroma chemical that feels like the executives are like, Joker laughing while they're like tipping the ethyl maltol and sugar into their sacred oak barrels, just ruins everything for me. It's like putting whipped cream on shit. Okay, no matter how much you dress it up, it's still shit. And that's how this feels to me. It feels like they have engineered this, like you can tell, it almost feels like the whole point of the fragrance is to capture people in the first 10 minutes, to trap them in this web. And they dumped an absolute metric ton of sugar in this fragrance. And it just ruins it. Just absolutely ruins it for me. So this is the exact opposite experience of Owlens, as kind of once the dry down happens in a couple hours, I really start to like what Lustre turns into as I drop it. Excuse me. So I like this sort of. It's a shame too because in the opening, there are some redeeming qualities as I said, but I like the meditative sandalwood that starts to come through later on. Even though this sandalwood doesn't smell as smooth and as deep as they may make it feel, okay? Because the selling point to this is, it's been barrel aged for 6 months, which adds this unbelievable amount of depth. And the sandalwood here feels very modern in a way. It feels like there's some sharp edges, not so sharp that it's going to rip the inside of your nose out, but there are sharp edges to this. But the rough edges actually seem to work better later on in the dry down. Once that insane overdose of whatever that BDK gene or material is, we need a word for that. Whatever that thing is in the opening that I hate so much. But the Cypriol adds this oud-like accord, that comes later on. And you get little bits of smokiness, little bits of that, tarry, sort of ambery. They mentioned coffee. I would say maybe a little bit more of like smoky, earthy touches from the myrrh. And the amber mix, whatever it is, the benzoin, the amber arome, mixes very well with the spices. There's a 4-hour dry down here. And 4 to 5 hours in, that's where I think the fragrance really hits its stride. That's where the fragrance becomes probably the best version of itself, is how I would put it, okay? Who knows how much of this special infusion technique has anything to do with it? Who knows if it's just in our heads because they told us about it? But once that boogeyman in the top, if you guys have any ideas for that name of whatever the hell that, modern style fragrance is, leave it in the comments. But once that boogeyman finally gives up the ghost, I can enjoy the scent. Now, like I said, it's a shame because the opening has some redeeming qualities. I like that boozy touch. I wish I could remove it from that crazy sweetness. And I actually really like the dry, clean iris that comes across as papery and matte, in finish. And the spice combination is a throwback to things like, something like this. Maybe something like, Z14 or Valentino's Vendetta Pour Homme. These are both sadly discontinued. Unbelievable that Z14 is discontinued. Or if you want maybe a couple modern niche fragrances, if you know the Spice Accord and something like Roja's Apex or Tom Ford's Italian Cypress, which is also discontinued, you will like the Spice Accord in this, okay? The Spice Accord in and of itself, I really like the combination of the cardamom, and I'm pretty sure there's some other spices in there, but the cardamom is pretty evident. And like I said, that effervescent explanation of a cardamom goes very well. It blends very well together, okay? It just feels like it's sad to see this modern thing kind of ruining what could be a very nice fragrance. And when I reviewed Outlands, I said I like the opening enough that if you gave me a bottle, I would just reapply it every hour or two just to experience that beautiful opening, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed the opening of Outlands. Just to avoid the dry down, I'd just reapply every hour or two. I don't know if I would wear Lustre if you gave me a bottle of this, to be honest with you. Waiting the first couple hours for whatever that bad gene is, that bad genome, to get the hell out of the way, to give up the ghost and allow the fragrance to go through the rest of its dry down is just too much for me. I don't think I would. I think I would just wear some of the other stuff that I love so much. So it's a shame too, because I really love Julian Rasquinet's work. I reviewed things like The Moon from him, which, go check out my review of that. Pretty soon I will be reviewing, he's got a fragrance from Histoire de Parfum's rare collection called Fidelis. I'll review that on the channel very soon. I'm a fan of his work, I reviewed St. Dupont Perfect Tobacco on the channel. That was a Julian Rasquinet. And Paul Guerlain is an up-and-coming perfumer. So, you have one that I really, really respect with Julian Rasquinet, and then you have Paul Guerlain, who I think is a really up-and-coming name in the perfume world. And Paul Guerlain is obviously running in these circles where he's doing fragrances for Louboutin and Amouage and all this stuff, you know? And I really feel like he should be the apprentice at Guerlain. I feel like when Thierry Vasseur retires, it should be Paul Guerlain's shop to run. It's, you know, it's his name on the door, if you will. Delphine Jelk should stay on to help ease the transition or whatever it is. It just seems so wrong having a Guerlain doing an Amouage, you know? Um, but whatever. That's the state of 2024. To me, Lustre has no shine, you know? This, for me anyways, I would say it's a big pass. Now, it lasts forever. I will say that. I've had a chance to test it twice. Both times I could smell it when I woke up the next morning. So I'm going to say 10 plus hours, all right, of longevity or whatever it is. But $450 for 100 mils with this very generic thing that almost seems like they're borrowing from other niche fragrance houses now. I don't know. I would say you would have to really be enthralled with this style of fragrance to go for this, in my opinion. There's just so much better. There's so much better for so much more. You think about how much you can get for $450, especially if you're like a value shopper. Man, in the vintage world, sometimes you can find amazing fragrances for 20 or 30 bucks. So you could build 10 or 20 bottle fragrance collection with $450. So yeah, that's my take. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know if you think differently from how I feel. As always, it's a pleasure getting to do these. Thank you, Allie, for sending this my way. We'll try to knock out reasons within the next couple days, and then we'll be done with the essences, early impressions, and move on to other things. But like I said, I feel like I'm wasting my time doing these reviews. But then on the other hand, so many people keep asking about them that I figure, screw it, I'm just gonna knock them out. So that's my thoughts. Unfortunately, as much as I like the dry down, the top is a dud, big dud for me. So that's my take. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, everyone. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.